Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being here. My name is Martin Nieves, and I am the Community Development Manager for the Nevadan, El Nevadense. Sean bienvenidos todos a nuestro evento hosted by El Nevadense and Climate Power. I am honored to serve as your Masters of Ceremony today. Before we dive into discussions, I would like to take a moment to go back almost a year, a little bit more than a year from now, when we were trying to launch a newsroom with a concept that it is very well needed in Nevada, which is targeting reaching our Latine community with information that is factual, that is community-based, and that cares for the issues that we Latinos, Latines care the most. I remember going back and writing a bunch of emails trying to reach organizations that work, amazing organizations that work in the state, trying to collaborate. And my pitch was, we're going to do great. We're here in Nevada to stay. We're reaching Latinos. Hablamos español. It's crazy. We need this reporting, and we had nothing. We didn't even have a full staff at our team, but we knew that following the courier model, we were going to do great. Today, a year after a little bit of a year after trying and doing amazing reporting by our amazing reporters, I'm proud to say that we've grown our audience to more than 140,000 plus followers, including, thank you, including 107 plus thousand email subscribers that constantly read our stuff and they're expecting our bilingual stuff in Espanol. Something that, seeing those numbers, we can see that there was a part missing in Nevada, and people are hungry for this information that is going to take them to make the right choices at time on signing an important paper like a proposition, like a ballot. Our mission at the Nevadan, El Nevadense, is to provide factual information in Spanish, in Español. If you let me, I'm going to switch to Spanish now. Necesitamos, la comunidad latina está hambrienta de información. Nos sentimos fuera del sistema porque las grandes corporaciones de medios han tomado el control de la información que se distribuye. Y gracias a eso y a la falta de información en nuestro bello estado, Nevada, salimos y votamos por las personas equivocadas. Y esto nos está afectando en muchas maneras, en diferentes problemáticas en las que nos presentamos, incluyendo las injusticias en el cambio en ambientales, las injusticias ambientales que se nos presentan día a día. Latinos are joining together tonight to fight for environmental justice. And we're honored to be here hosting the event with our amazing partners and sponsors, Climate Power, to deliver and engage in important conversations that hopefully you watching at home feel empowered and go out and do something on this upcoming election. Before we jump into our next segment, we're going to be having a panel, but before we do, I would like to take a moment to thank everybody that put this event together, the team, El Nevadense, the Nevadan, our partners that are here with us, and of course, our beautiful audience that is watching at home. Now, I have the pleasure of introducing our amazing moderator, Casey Harrison. Thank you, Casey. Now step off. Okay, thank you for that. Now I will be introducing our partners from Climate Power. Ruby, if you can please come up stage.
Hola. Hi, everyone. I'm here. Hello, hello. Um, Thank you, everyone, for being here. First of all, I am Ruby Martinez. I am the Deputy Managing Director at Climate Power and Acción, which we are the Latino arm of Climate Power. Before I begin, I want to thank everyone for being here for this important conversation that we're about to have with climate leaders. Thank you, everyone, for being here. It is a very important conversation to have, especially during this time. We know, we feel how the climate crisis is impacting our community, and we should be having these conversations more often. So I do have my hard paper here, and I have an important message to share, so I'll be reading off, so excuse me. Yeah, I'm very honored to be here and introduce the panel that we're about to have right now, Building a Clean Energy Economy. This conversation will explore the unique climate challenges facing the Latino community in the state, including water conservation, extreme heat, and air quality. Our speakers will provide insights on how the state has leveraged key investments from the Clean Energy Plan, also known as the IRA, or the Inflation Reduction Act, and the bipartisan infrastructure law to create a more sustainable and resilient and equitable future. Thanks to the Biden-Harris administration, the Clean Energy Plan is already having a transformative impact in our community, turning the Nevada state into a solar and manufacturing powerhouse. This Clean Energy Plan has attracted already over $14.5 billion in investments and has created over 20,448 good-paying jobs just here in the state alone. These policies not only provide opportunity for families and workers, but also it strengthens the role of unions in clean energy, the economy, which is very important to advancing the clean energy transition. Before we begin, I want to highlight the important work that Climate Power is doing, and just the work that we're undertaking as a team, Climate Power and Acción. We are a strategic communications organization, and we are dedicated to winning the politics of climate. We work to educate Americans about the progress we're making on climate action, highlighting the clean energy investments that benefit everyone. And of course, holding big oil accountable for its role in exacerbating the climate crisis. Climate Power and Acción leads a narrative on climate issues for Latino communities by informing them of the benefits of the Clean Energy Plan, and we collaborate with partners like Chispa and Make the Road to make this happen at a local level. Our mission is to ensure that climate action remains at the forefront of the national conversation, especially for Latinos. From extreme heat to poor air quality to high energy costs and health challenges, climate change has affected every aspect of our lives, and it is a top issue for Latinos. And Latinos will keep this in mind when they're going to the ballots and vote. It's not a surprise that Latino voters want leaders that take action on the climate crisis. And just really quickly, I want to share a recent poll that really backs this and says that Latinos want more action to ensure that we are working to combat the climate crisis and extreme weather. And Latinos support leaders like Vice President Kamala Harris, especially when they hear about the benefits of the clean energy economy. Everything is on the line this election. All the progress made on climate action this past 4 years can be lost. I'm almost done. When Latino voters are better informed about the impact of climate crisis, they are inspired to turn out at the polls with climate action in mind. The Latino vote will be decisive this election, ensuring that we're electing climate champions who will protect the progress that we have already achieved and to continue further climate action. Thank you very much for everyone.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I would like to take a moment to introduce Ruby Martinez. She is someone that has been a powerful advocate in the intersection of climate, politics, and media. Ruby Martinez is the Deputy Managing Director for Climate Power in Acción, a project of Climate Power, a leading strategic political communications organization focused on climate crisis. With her extensive experience in both English and Spanish language journalism, Ruby brings a unique perspective on how can effectively communicate climate crisis issues to diverse audiences. Thank you. Now, let's dive into our first panel titled Building a Clean Energy Economy, where we'll explore how Nevada is leading the charge in clean energy innovation and job creation. Our panelists are experts in policy and industry, and they'll share their perspectives on the next steps Nevada is taking to create a greener and more sustainable economy. Now, I have the pleasure to introduce Casey Harrison.
Thanks, Martin.
Casey Harrison is our seasoned journalist and currently serves as the senior political correspondent for the Nevadan. With a deep passion for storytelling, he covers a wide range of critical topics from housing to climate, always ensuring that stories of everyday Nevadans are heard and brought to the forefront. In his work for the Nevadan, Casey is not only interviewing key political figures like Senator Jackie Rosen, but he also is on the ground connecting with Nevadans and collecting stories that matters to all of us. Today, Casey will be our moderator for this exciting first panel. Next, we have Cynthia Moore, a passionate advocate for environmental justice and development manager at Make the Road Nevada. With nearly 20 years of experience, Cynthia has dedicated her career to fighting for clean air, clean energy, water conservation, and protection for workers exposed to extreme heat and poor air quality. Raised in a community deeply affected by environmental issues, Cynthia's commitment to addressing these challenges runs deep in addition to her impactful work with Make the Road Nevada. Please join me in welcoming Cynthia Moore. It is my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Rudy Zamora, a dedicated advocate with over 15 years of experience amplifying the voices of the Latina community. Rudy is currently the director of advocacy for Chicanos por la Causa Nevada, where he leads the Latino Loud campaign. Rudy has been driving force behind numerous initiatives, from expanding educational equity during his time at Teach for America to spearheading a Latino-led climate movement at Chispa, Nevada as part of the League of Conservation Voters. Please join me in welcoming Rudy Zamora. Now, it's my total pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Angeline Tavalda. As the former communications director for the Nevada Conservation League, Angeline is a passionate advocate for environmental justice and climate action. With a strong focus on the urgent challenges facing Nevada, such as extreme heat, wildfires, and droughts, she has been at the forefront of efforts to mobilize support for meaningful climate legislation. Angeline believes in the power of community engagement and collaboration to drive real change. She has worked tirelessly to elevate voices from the most affected by environmental issues and to advocate for policies that promote sustainability and equity. Today, she will share her insights on the critical importance of investing in clean energy solutions and how can we all contribute to a healthier planet. Please welcome Angeline Tavalda.
Thanks, Martin.
Thank you.
Like he just said, my name is Casey Harrison, and I am the senior political correspondent for the Nevadan. Thank you so much for joining us today. And, I'm just going to sort of start off going around asking each of our panelists a little bit about what their job entails and just sort of introducing themselves and talking a little bit more about the role. So, Cynthia, I'll start with you. Can you just talk a little bit about your organization and what you do there?
Thank you so much for having us here and having this conversation today. Cynthia Moore, Development Manager for Make the Road Nevada. Make the Road Nevada is an organization that was established right here in Nevada back in 2017, so we've been here for 7 years. We're an advocacy organization that centers both immigrant and low-income communities, which are the communities that tend to be left behind in conversations, especially policy conversations. We are an organization that centers our members' voices. We are a member-run organization. We work on various issues from environmental justice, housing, LGBTQ. We also have a youth committee that we center the voices of our youth. As a development manager, my job is to raise money for the organization in order for us to be able to do the work that we are doing for our members and also our community. Make the Road is not just here in Nevada, but we have been since the 80s in New York. We also have presence in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Connecticut as well. We are the only Make the Road here out in the West. And as a development manager, I raise funds for the organization, primarily around environmental and climate work.
Thank you, Cynthia. Rudy, can you tell me a little bit about you and your organization?
Yes, awesome. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. My name is Rudy Zamora. I am the Advocacy Director for Chicanos por la Causa Action Fund. And our mission statement at Chicanos por la Causa is we drive economic and political empowerment, which means we are working within community to ensure that the Latino voice and the voices of those that are not normally at the table have a seat at the table. And we focus in 5 different areas. We focus on housing, education, health and human services. Oh, I knew I was going to forget this. Advocacy and housing, education. It's been a long day. In the next
economic development.
20-something days is going to be economic development. It's right in our mission statement. How can I forget that one? But I'm sure everyone is as brain dead as I am, especially with how short of an election, or where we are with the election season. So thank you for being here.
And thank you again for joining us, Rudy. Angeline, can you tell us a little bit more about your organization and what you sort of do on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, thanks, Casey, and thanks again for having us here. I'm Angeline Tabalba. I'm with the Nevada Conservation League. I'm their Clean Energy Plan consultant. We're a local environmental nonprofit, and we go by being the political voice of Nevada's conservation community. And we do a lot of our work in 3 ways. We elect pro-conservation champions to office, and once they get in office, we spearhead pro-conservation policy. And then we also build collaboration to make sure that we work with a lot of organizations who have those same commitments as we do.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you all again. So our next phase, what we're going to do here, I have some individualized questions. I have some more generalized ones. For those, I will still sort of lead it off, give it to a person, but we can all sort of chime in as we see fit. But for these individualized, Cynthia, I'll sort of start with you. And so you're with Make the Road Nevada, an organization whose mission is to empower and advocate for our immigrant communities. And you have a long history of working in the environmental space. So how often are climate and immigration issues sort of intersecting?
Thank you. Having tech. Okay, there we go. The thing, I think one of the things that we always have a tendency to think of when it comes to issues, we tend to think of them as individual issues, but that's not the case. Environmental issues intersect with everything from housing to transportation to even healthcare. I see those issues intersecting all the time with environmental justice. East Las Vegas is primarily where a lot of the Latina community in Nevada lives. They're primarily immigrant or first generation as well. East Las Vegas, if you were to look at the RTC heat map that they did a few years back, you will see that East Las Vegas is right in the middle of the urban heat island. If you also look at the air quality any given time of Las Vegas, you can also see that it goes hand in hand with the urban heat island. And this is where I live. I live in East Las Vegas, and it's where a lot of our immigrant community lives as well. So there's also the asthma aspect of it as well. Our kids are more likely to suffer from asthma attacks than our white counterparts, and it has to do because of where we live, where we work, and where we go to school. We're constantly exposed to poor air quality. We're constantly exposed to poor air quality or the environmental issues that we're constantly exposed to. But I do see it that it does affect us all the time.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. This one is for Angeline. And so I know a lot of the things that you cover, coincide with federal policy. And so over the last 4 years, President Biden has signed into law a number of bills that have been aimed at bolstering America's green economy. And some of those include the Inflation Reduction Act, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, the CHIPS and Science Act, and those are kind of just to name a few. So what consumer programs have those new laws produced, and how can Nevadans take advantage of them?
Yeah, you know, we're
Hot potato.
we're really proud of the investments from the Biden and Harris administration.
Here, we can pass this over too if it's easier.
Hi. Yeah. We are really excited about all of the significant investments from the Biden and Harris administration, and you just named a few of them. We sort of take all of these and we name them the Clean Energy Plan because it's a little bit easier for voters to understand. But what's amazing about these Clean Energy Plan investments is those consumer level benefits. And what I really love about these federal benefits is like it's an approach that includes stakeholders at every level. You know, we're telling governments to invest, we're telling businesses to invest, and we're also telling consumers to invest. And so the provisions in the Clean Energy Plan provide tax credits for clean energy. It provides tax credits for energy efficiency. And this covers things like 30% off installing and purchasing solar panels for your home. It includes 30% off battery storage if you want to install battery storage in your home. You can also get tax credits for installing an EV, an electric vehicle charger in your home. And if you're in the market for a car, you can get up to $7,500 off a new American-made electric vehicle. And if you're looking for a used one, you can get up to $4,000 off. And that's because of these clean energy tax credits. And if you're looking for also just weatherizing your home, making upgrades to your home so you can reduce that energy bill, there are tax credits for better insulation for your home. There's tax credits for upgrading some of your external facing windows and doors. And one of my favorite parts of the tax credits list is there's a tax credit for up to $150 for a home energy audit. So you can better understand how your home is consuming energy and get recommendations on what things to improve. And so these really go back to some of these kitchen table issues that Nevada families are talking about. We're talking about the cost of everything. We're talking about our economy. And the Clean Energy Plan provides these solutions to help bring down the cost. You would talk about the high prices of gas, and this is allowing us to, make it more affordable to purchase an electric vehicle. We're talking about the high cost of our utility bills. A lot of us are we're mid-October and we're still seeing really high temperatures outside. And so the more we can weatherize our home, make energy efficient upgrades, families can't just save on the technology up front, but they'll make those savings add up month to month and year to year.
Wow, thank you. You talk about the recent heat wave that we've had, and we'll touch more on that later. But I think the thing that you brought up is, these new laws have produced a lot of tax incentives, and when I hear taxes, I just think of a lot of paperwork. So how does the Nevada Clean Energy Fund sort of fit into that, and how do you facilitate these consumer-driven programs?
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about some things that NCL did, but what's cool about, in particular, the electric vehicle tax credit. Starting in 2024, you can actually get that tax credit as a discount upfront at your dealer. Instead of needing to wait an entire year to file that tax credit, you can get that right now as an upfront discount. The other part is NCL took it upon ourselves to do a lot of this education. We set out to do a canvas in May of this year. Through the summer, we had organizers go door to door. We knocked over 112,000 doors in Clark and Washoe County because we wanted to do this education and connect Nevada residents to the resources and the tax credits that are available to them. At the time, there wasn't a lot of education and a lot of amplification for these tax credits. But we were really excited when the IRS came out with some data because in 2023 alone, we learned that over 41,000 Nevada families saved over $151 million just in these tax credits. So these things are popular. People are using them, and they're helping Nevadans save money.
Wow, that's great news. Rudy, I'm going to move things over to you a little bit. So Chicanos por la Causa describes itself as a community development organization that, of course, advocates, like you were saying earlier, in service areas like housing, health and human services, economic development, and education. So can you describe the nature of your work and how it sort of correlates with uplifting Latine communities, not just here in Las Vegas, and that sort of intersection between not only environmental justice, but economic justice as well?
Yes. All right. So as Cynthia mentioned, when we look at climate, it's an intersection. And at Chicanos por la Causa, we work with helping folks with housing, to health and human services, and everything in our communities. I can tell you that my 9-year-old, when he was 4, suffered an asthma attack. That was, many of you in the room know, really hard. It led him into cardiac arrest and respiratory failure. Thankfully, he survived, but again, it's a story that should not be repeated. Parents, I don't wish that on any person or any parents have to go through that. But these are stories that we hear in the communities that we serve. Our office is right down the street from where Cynthia was just mentioning. We're off the corner up in Bonanza and Maryland Parkway. Those neighborhoods are the most impacted. So the clients that we service, the community that comes into our office are living in this neighborhood. So we make sure that as we're talking to them and helping them get into housing, affordable housing, as we're helping them with their health and human services, that they have access to that. We have a free health clinic that comes every second and fourth Tuesday of the month, and a lot of the people that are coming in, it's asthma-related conditions that are coming in, especially young kids.
Wow. And so are these conditions, I mean, like, is this more correlated to the poor air quality that are in these communities, in these neighborhoods? Is it because of different other environmental factors?
You know, and I'm going to be completely honest. One of the things that we're doing is the housing crisis. Our families are being pushed closer and closer to the highway, which drives closer and closer to the highway. The 18-wheelers that are contaminating our neighborhoods. And that's why when Chispa started a campaign for clean buses for Healthy Niños a couple of years ago, they were huge advocates on ensuring that school buses were transitioned to electric school buses. First thing you notice when you go into the schools in our neighborhoods or any neighborhood is the buses idling outside of the schools, and the kids are walking right by, and they're taking all that contamination in. So yes, it's our neighborhoods. We see lack of trees, we see lack of walkways, we see lack of everything that you would normally see in your areas like Summerlin or Henderson. So our communities are being impacted because the resources aren't there. But thanks to some of the work that's being done, we're now being able to help implement more walkways. We're trying to get more greenery in our neighborhoods through some beautification projects, but it all goes hand in hand.
Mm-hmm. Now, Cynthia, I want to turn it to you a little bit. Obviously, I feel like you two sort of have a lot of common in terms of the issues that you work on and trying to attain that level of environmental justice. Unfortunately, our keynote speaker today, Attorney General Aaron Ford, he wasn't quite able to make it, but I think that we should turn this conversation to talking a little bit about some of the action that our lawmakers and that our state is taking. We saw earlier in the year, and they're still trying to work through it right now, but the Nevada OSHA is trying to implement some rules in regards to heat restrictions for outdoor workers. How can you protect Latino communities, the folks every day who they work outside, but also, like off the clock when that happens? How do you sort of just go about making sure that, when it's 5:01 and everybody's going home for the day, it's still 110 degrees in the middle of July. So how do we keep these people safe?
Thank you for that question. Yes, I'm very familiar with the lack of protections that our outdoor workers have in Nevada. Last session, when I was still with the Nevada Environmental Justice Coalition, we worked extremely close with Senator Edgar Flores, who sponsored Senate Bill 427, which would have given protections for people that work not just outdoors, but also indoors in extreme heat and poor air quality. And we decided to include also indoor workers because a lot of the complaints that were coming into OSHA for extreme heat were coming in from folks that work in kitchens or warehouses. So we have a tendency, we need to change our mindset that extreme heat only affects people that work outdoors, but it also affects people that work indoors where they may be working at a warehouse where the AC is off or the AC is not big enough that's able to cool down that location where they're currently at working. Right now, they are going through the regulatory process through OSHA, but one thing that I'm proud of with Senate Bill 427 is that we brought attention right here in Nevada on an issue that a lot of people had already assumed that because we do have extreme weather, extreme heat, that these workers were already protected. So we were able to take that away and say, you know what, this is an issue. We have people working in these extreme weather conditions, and they deserve to have protections. And it was something so simple as making sure that they had access to water, shade, and be able to take a water break when they felt like they needed water. It's not like the bill would have made it impossible for people to complete their work or what they were doing, but we wanted to make sure, we know that Nevada is home to two of the fastest warming cities, Las Vegas and Reno. So we want to make sure that, one, people are still able to work, but they're able to do it safely. One of the biggest things as well that we need to remember that a lot of the folks that work outdoors, yes, they're Latina, and they're not just exposed to extreme heat or these extreme conditions while they're working, but a lot of them live on the east side, where it tends to be 10 degrees hotter. So they never really get a break from being exposed to extreme heat because they may be working out at a construction site, in a kitchen or a warehouse, and they're coming home and it might be maybe 108 degrees at the airport, but it's 118 degrees where they live. We need to make sure that we're not just also protecting our outdoor workers, but we are continuing to make sure that we're working towards the tree canopy equity so that at least these folks also have a break from being exposed to the extreme heat.
Thank you, Cynthia. You know, I'm going to open it up to everybody here, but for the sake of this conversation, I'm going to first direct the question to Rudy, but anyone else can feel free to jump in. One of the things that I have noticed since covering the intersection between federal policy implementation and the environment is sort of the push and pull here specifically in Nevada between expanding clean energy opportunities and the implementation of that with creating and protecting public lands and wildlife from new projects like vast solar farms or perhaps lithium or cobalt mining projects that are critical in the grand scheme of things for the supply chain as it relates to electric vehicle batteries and other types of electrical batteries. And so that's before we talk about expansions in Clark County and Washoe County for housing developments, but as advocates, Rudy, how do you sort of reckon with that need to expand clean energy opportunities with protecting the environment?
That's a really good question. Before we dive into that, I think we need to acknowledge that as we need to expand, we also need to recognize that Nevada is 87% public lands, and that a lot of that public land is not our land, that's indigenous land, and they're sacred grounds for the indigenous community. So we can't just show up and say, hey, there's a resource here that we need to advance clean energy. I think these two items have to work hand in hand in respect with the community. And there has to be a way around it. I know that lithium, there's a huge controversy in northern Nevada right now because of the way that the lithium is being mined and the site that it's being mined out of. But we need to come together as a community and be able to respect the sacred grounds. We need to be able to respect the wildlife that's around that area. Again, Nevada being 87% public land, it's a lot. I know in the past I've heard silly things like, oh, the way solar panels are placed have to be a certain amount of feet off the ground because the desert tortoise can get stuck. The desert tortoise is a treasure to Nevada, but we also have to make sure that the solar panels aren't being like reflective to the sun because the birds will think it's water and they will dive right into it. So there has to be a way to mitigate and work in between the resources that we need and how we come across those resources without hurting the communities that are living in those where that resources. Because a lot of the time, let's be completely honest, the resources is where the impacted communities are, and we're just coming in there. And I'm gonna say it's white corporations, large corporations that don't care about the communities, and they're just in there for one thing and one thing only. They don't even make a promise to restore the land to the way that they found it. So we need to be mindful on how we do that and be respectful of that.
Thank you. Angeline, what do you think? Sorry, I didn't mean to throw you on the spot right there with the mic.
No, Rudy made some really great points about centering tribal voices. And, when it comes to development of any kind, clean energy, housing, we're going to come up against some challenges. And NCL also agrees we need a more responsible approach, one that's going to fulfill our energy needs and one that's going to prioritize public lands protection, wildlife protection, and also the preservation of our cultural heritage. And I think often we get put into this decision between, or we pit clean energy development and public lands protection against each other, but it's a lot more complex. It's a lot more nuanced than that. And like Rudy said, these are conversations that need to center tribal voices, and something that we can definitely have at a different time to make sure that they're in the room and they're here on the stage talking about how to steward their land because they know it best, because it's their land and because they've been taking care of it for generations. So, as an organization, NCL is really focused on this historical historic federal funding opportunity that's in front of us, and making sure we can reduce pollution in communities, reduce pollution in our neighborhoods, and make sure we can lower costs for all of our families.
Thanks, Angeline. Cynthia, would you like a chance to answer?
I don't have much more to add. I think Rudy and Angeline did a really good job at explaining what's at stake. But I do want to say one thing. When we think about solar panels, we need to stop thinking about putting them out in the desert. We have a lot of parking lots, and I mean, just coming here, I love coming to the Springs Preserve, not just because it's a great place to bring my 7-year-old son and he can explore and run around and be a child, but also because I know that I'm going to have shaded parking because we have the solar panels here in the parking lot, and we should be looking at that instead of looking outward. We need to look at what we currently have. I know that we've been talking about the urban heat island and how it's hotter. We need to look at shade structures that can also help with cooling down our urban heat islands and giving some relief to the folks that live in East Las Vegas and other areas that are also experiencing higher temperatures. And why not do the solar panels in the parking lots? I'm sure I'm not the only one that enjoys having a shaded parking space anywhere that I may go.
The cheap car shades that you get on Amazon can only cool your car so much. Well, you bring up a really good point, though, and I'm surprised. Like, I'm from Michigan originally, and even back there, like, you see carports that have solar panels, and I'm surprised for a place like the desert. You would think, and obviously, I mean, if things get so hot already, having a place like Las Vegas that is mostly concrete, it's more concrete than it is anything else. Why we haven't thought of more foliage, more shade, more spaces like that. Do you think that's an issue that comes down to local public planning, or do you feel like we as a community need to better advocate for things like those?
I like to answer that. I do think it has to do with local jurisdiction more than state. The state can direct the local jurisdictions to look into these solutions, but the local municipalities should not wait until the state directs them to do the right thing. We can look at City of Phoenix, for example, is one of the municipalities I look at all the time, and they're doing great things to address the extreme heat. I mean, granted, it's a little hotter there, but at some point, 115 degrees and beyond that just feels the same to me. But we should be looking at what other cities that are similar to Las Vegas are doing and looking at advocating at the local level as well. It is up to us to show up to those to those council appointments, those county commission meetings as well, and start advocating there. Because at the end of the day, we cannot depend on the state legislature here because, one, we meet every other year for 120 days. But year-round, we do have our local municipalities that meet year-round, and we can start making that change here locally.
Thank you.
I would have to agree with that, and I think that there's a huge opportunity when we look at covered parking, like Cynthia was mentioning. There's a huge opportunity, and I'm going to throw CCSD under the bus, but if CCSD, being the 5th largest school district in the country, can have covered parking in all their schools, with solar panels on top, producing energy that's going to power the schools and producing free shade for their teachers. And then they're out for the summer. They can put that energy they're producing into their neighborhoods. And then guess what? We have something called community solar that people can buy into it. But we're not there yet. And we need to. We need everyone's voice to start talking to not only legislators, but talking to your city council, your school board trustees, to ensuring that these things happen, because Nevada has many opportunities. And if we can tie one thing to the other and just have a win-win, why not?
You make a really good point. And of course, I think talking about commercial and municipal solar is a different thing. We talked about those singular and consumer-driven programs earlier. One of those that I've covered pretty extensively, and I know that Angeline is pretty familiar with, is Solar for All. Can you talk about that program a little bit more? You touched on it earlier, but in terms of it's kind of daunting, right? When you go and you don't have a solar panel, you just see them on a neighbor's roof, and you're like, wow, how can I get there? What is that process like?
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to give a big shout out to the Nevada Clean Energy Fund, which is our state's green bank, who helped secure that federal funding. This is, again, like Nevada going out of its way to take every opportunity that it can to bring these federal funds back home. Earlier this year, the Nevada Clean Energy Fund was awarded $156 million, pretty significant for a Solar for All program. And that's going to help break barriers to folks who cannot install solar. If you're not a homeowner, solar might not be the answer for you. Solar might not be possible for you. And so the Nevada Clean Energy Fund, through its Solar for All program, is going to help build community solar projects. It's going to help build solar on single-family homes and multifamily homes to make sure that we can sort of break this barrier between like needing to own a home and needing to have capital investment just to be able to reap the benefits of solar, because everybody should have access to the benefits of clean energy, regardless of how much you make and regardless of where you live.
No, very good points. Very good points. I want to turn the page over to water. Of course, it is probably the most quintessential resource that we have here in Southern Nevada. Of course, everybody needs it, but quite frankly, we live in a desert and we rely on a river, the Colorado River, for the vast majority of our water for not only personal use, but for agriculture and for everything in between. And so, Angeline, I'll start with you. The Colorado River's water levels are continuing to decline. How is Nevada sort of working to ensure that communities, of all strokes, and even particularly the Latino communities in agriculture and construction, but everyone across the state has access to reliable water resources? I should preface this, I don't want to make it sound like Nevada is running out of water. That is not the case. Experts say that we have water for a long time, but, over to you.
Yeah, no, Nevada's the driest state in the nation, but we're also home to the best water conservation programs in our country. We've got the Southern Nevada Water Authority and the Truckee Meadow Water Authority that are just doing so much great work to make sure our state's going to have waters for a year to come. But what is amazing about the Clean Energy Plan is it also prioritized water conservation in that funding. We got about $141 million for about 20 water infrastructure projects, including some funding for the Las Vegas Wash. And I want to thank Congresswoman Susie Lee for advocating so hard for that funding. And we also got about $4 billion from the Inflation Reduction Act that's going to the Bureau of Reclamation to mitigate drought specifically. And it's going to prioritize the Colorado Basin, which is where we get our water. And so this is funding that's helping us mitigate drought right now. It's helping us conserve water right now, but there's also policy that we need to work on at the state level. Last year, we were proud to support the non-functional turf ban. Nevada was the first state in the entire nation to pass a bill to ban non-functional turf. And if it's completely implemented in Southern Nevada, it'll help us save 950 billion gallons of water each year, which is a huge win for our state.
Great. Thank you so much. Also, in talking about water, Rudy, I'll ask this one for you. How can state policies better support the Latino community's engagement in sustainable water practices? And what I mean by that is, of course, when it comes to water issues, especially over the Colorado, there's a lot that is out of individuals' hands and even local government's hands, right? But there is still action that they can do. Angeline talked about how the state is able to restrict things like artificial turf. And so what sort of actions would you like to see taken to ensure that we are protecting our water resources?
I think one of the things that we need to look at is it's hot outside. We all want that personal pool. We all want to have a pool in our backyard. And I know the water district does a really good job in making sure that we're not building super big pools. There's regulations now. But if we can just, I'm going to be honest, cut back on being selfish and having a big personal pool, like there's community pools, there's 2 water parks now in Las Vegas. Back in my day, it was just the one down on the Strip. But we have other ways that we can keep our families cool, and that's going back to conserving water, but ensuring that the scenery that we put in our houses is desert friendly. Some of the and going back into our neighborhoods, you're going to see that some of our neighborhoods are the ones that have the desert landscape. They have they're saving water. But you go into the more predominant side of town, into the Summerlin area, the McDonald Ranch, and they're really green. They have the nice trees. They're the ones wasting the water. You will drive down the road and you'll see the water running down the sidewalk. But if that happens in my neighborhood, guess what? The water authority will be right there, and we'll have a fine right away. That doesn't happen across the valley. And so one of the things that I would like to see is making sure that if my neighborhood it can comply to the desert plans, why can't the rest of the city or the state do that? Because we all live in the same city. We all have access to the same water. And like you said, Nevada's nowhere near running out of water, but I want to make sure that there's water for 7 more generations after me.
Yeah, no, very good points. We have limited time left, so I'm going to sort of turn the page to something that we all are either really going to enjoy or really dread, and that is politics. And so we, of course, are less than a month out from the 2024 election. How does your advocacy in the months and years ahead change depending on the outcome of the election? Angeline, I'll sort of start with you. Does the occupant of the White House change what your organization's goals are? And does one party's control of Congress have a similar outcome?
Yeah, I'll say that NCL is going to continue to be committed to our mission, which is to making sure we protect our climate, our air, our land, our water, and our health. And we're going to continue to do that through the 3 ways we do that is election pro-conservation champions, pro-conservation policy, and working with pro-conservation organizations. But if we do see a change in the White House, in November, we're going to see a change in the speed and the scale that clean energy is going to get deployed. It matters who's in the White House, and we have a candidate running for office that put out this like nearly 900-page plan of how they're going to exactly roll all of this progress back. And we just talked about a ton of the investments. Ruby talked about it before we got on stage about the $14.5 billion investments we got in the state, the over 20,000 jobs we've had as a result of the clean energy plan, and we're only 2 years in. And so we are still getting started with this clean energy progress that's rolling out, but all of this gets put to risk this election. And that's what we hope voters will think about when they're at the polls, about going to the ballot box and realizing this is the progress that we need to defend. And it's helping Nevada diversify our economy. And, that's Nevada, needing to diversify economy is something we've been talking about for probably as long as I am old. So, the Clean Energy Plan is offering this opportunity to make clean energy this place that's creating jobs so that there is more opportunities for job growth outside of the tourism community, outside of tourism, so families can get these good paying, these family sustaining, and these union jobs.
Thank you, Angeline. Rudy or Cynthia, I know that you guys are grassroots organizations, but does the outcome of the elections that are upcoming, does that have any bearing on what you guys sort of do on a day-to-day basis?
Cynthia, you probably have a longer answer, but for us, we're going to continue to drive economic and political power no matter who's at the White House. And we're going to continue doing that by making sure that our communities are advocating, whether that's one candidate over the other one. Our voices are going to have to be heard, and that's having conversations to ensure that things are implemented, or having our voices being heard because we're going to be demanding things. But we're going to continue doing the same work that we're doing in our community, in our neighborhoods. I think the messaging is just what's going to change. Is it going to be more of a, this is what we want, versus this is what we want, and the implementation process, versus all hell's on fire and we have to do a lot more than that.
Mm-hmm. Cynthia?
Yeah, Make the Road Action Nevada is committed to continue to advocate for our members and our immigrant communities in Nevada, regardless of who's at the White House or who has control of Congress. I have to agree with what Rudy says. I think the strategy there will have to change, replaying defense, offense? Are we seeing all this money that's coming in to Nevada currently under the current administration dry up? But we certainly have to stop thinking about it in terms of just the federal government and what happens at the federal level. We also have to keep an eye out on what happens at our state and local level as well. So we are committed to ensuring that our members and our membership has the tools that they need to continue to advocate for themselves and their families and their communities where they live.
No, thank you. I'm glad you bring up the point of local elections. They're, of course, probably the most important, and they have the largest bearing on our individual lives. And, you know, we talk about how the makeup right now of the legislature and the assembly, if Democrats are able to win control of, and not just win control, but they're one seat shy of a supermajority in the Senate. You know, obviously, all of these groups work closely with the state Democratic Party in terms of, you know, achieving policy goals. So, what would that mean for your organizations to be able to, you know, sort of be a check and not have Governor Lombardo there to sort of put the kibosh on various climate plans? Oh, I guess I should direct that out to somebody. Rudy, you seem eager to talk. We'll pan it to you.
I'm still thinking on that question. I was looking at Cynthia.
I think it's no surprise that we currently have a governor that does not believe in climate change. But regardless of what happens with this election, Make the Road Action Nevada is nonpartisan. We work with both parties because at the end of the day, at the legislature, you still need to work with both parties to ensure that legislation gets passed. But that just means that we have to bring up our members to Carson City probably a lot more. I don't know how many in this room has spent time in Carson City or the legislative building, but when you walk in there, it's mostly the legislators and like 500 lobbyists per legislator that's there. I honestly don't know what the number is, but it is hundreds of lobbyists per legislator. There's 63 legislators in Nevada, and I think last time there were over 1,000 registered lobbyists, something like that. It was a ridiculous amount of lobbyists that were registered. What we need to make sure is that we as a community are present. I know going to Carson City is not easy, but during COVID, a lot of things changed. We are now able to call in. You can call in from your home and make public comment or comment on a bill that you may be opposed or in support of. We also have a new beautiful legislative building that's extremely far away from community. Before, it used to be at the Grand Sawyer building, which was also right in the middle of East Las Vegas, and it was a little bit more easier to get people there. But now the building is far away.
Now you got to fight with the airport traffic.
Yeah, airport traffic, festival traffic. I mean, we have all these different events, right? So we do have to fight more with traffic just to be able to get our voices heard. But with technology, you can call in from your home or your job if you have a break.
Yeah. Well, we only have a couple minutes left, so I think this might be the last one here. Whether we like it or not, everything we've talked about today does all flow back to politics, right? And either at the state, local, or national level, have everyday folks that you have been talking with realize, and Angeline, I think we'll talk with you about this one, but have the people that you've been talking to realized that these programs like Solar for All or the green energy transition and these different efficiency programs were enacted by the Biden-Harris administration? I mean, for me, when I talk to people, a lot of times what I hear is, what has this administration done for me? And it's precisely programs like that. So how, do you think that they've done a good job of spreading the word on this, that these are programs that are available to people? And do you think that, because these are new programs, that they can have a bearing on people when it is time to go to the ballot box?
No, it's important to connect good policy to good policymakers, right? Understand who is crafting this policy with you in mind, because these programs were made for Nevada residents. I think what it comes down to is the reality is when you ask what the Biden administration has done for me, it's answer a lot of what I had said earlier, these kitchen table issues, to be able to go back to the conversations you're having with your families about the cost of gas prices, the cost of groceries are high, the cost of your utility bills are high. And so you are trying to make this connection, and that's a question we wanted to ask ourselves. Can residents make this connection, and what can we do to help them bridge that gap? So that's why we launched a canvas, and that's why we knocked the amount of doors that we did, because we wanted residents to understand that we're not just passing this really cool climate policy, but we pass it with American families at the center of the idea, that they were this vision of what we could have when we have expanded clean energy that doesn't leave anyone behind. And I talked earlier about this clean energy plan is amazing because it involves stakeholders at every single level. We want governments to participate. We want schools to participate. We want consumers to participate. We want businesses to all participate in this economy and build one so that when we can diverse our economy so that we're not in a place where we were during the pandemic, during Trump's administration, where Nevada lost the most amount of jobs across the nation. And we're diversifying that economy so we never come back to that place again.
I think that diversification is a really good way to drive it home to, Nevada is one of the most moderate states. It's a large share of independents. And I think that's a way to make it resonate with everyday people. That's more or less everything I had. We could fill time until the cows come home, but are there any kind of closing remarks? I feel like this has been a very productive conversation. So just, would anybody like to close it out?
So, Casey, I think Angelique made a really good point on the kitchen table conversations. I think, as you asked the question, are people having these conversations or asking you what has the administration done? I think it's up to us and everyone in this room to have those conversations, because there's a lot of dis and misinformation out there that we have to combat. So in the Latino community, we have the chisme. If my mom sees something on TikTok, on Facebook, she will call me and say, is this true? 90% of the time, it's fake. So I'm gonna have to say no, tell my tia, tell my other tia, and tell the neighbor that it's not true. So we need to have these conversations on the ground and rely on organizations like ours, but make sure that the dis and misinformation is also being combated on the ground.
Excellent. Cynthia, anything that you'd like to say?
I just want to say that we do need to have these conversations with our neighbors, our friends, and families, because I also get those calls, not really calls because I live right next door to my parents, but my mom will hear something on Univision and she takes that like it's the truth, right? Because she saw it on Univision, the one news source that she has been looking at since she immigrated to this country, since she was a teenager, as the truth. And we do need to make sure that that information gets out there. The other thing is that the Inflation Reduction Act, now known as the Clean Energy Plan, has gone through different names. So we need to ensure that we remind people that when we talk about the Clean Energy Plan and the Inflation Reduction Act, it's the same thing. And we need to remind folks as well that we may not see immediate changes with this act, but it is coming. The savings are coming. I certainly am waiting for the savings as a single mom. I am I live in a sole income household. So certainly the high price of energy certainly has a huge effect on my household. But we need to remind people it's not something that you may see overnight, but the change is coming. And it is up to us to make sure that we're making sure that we turn out to vote as well. And we're reminding our friends, family, and neighbors that they also have a voice this election.
Very good. Thank you so much. I believe that will conclude our Nevada Path Forward panel. So thank you so much. Thank you, everybody.
That was an incredible conversation. I don't know if you felt this, but I felt that they were speaking directly to me. Most of the pressing issues that they spoke on this panel, they're issues that matter to me. I'm not a migrant, but I am in some sort of way. I live in a border town, and most of the issues that were spoken, it's like, yes, thank you for working. I would like to give another round of applause to the panelists today, because their efforts are paying off on the communities in Nevada, and I wish that everyone was having those conversations at the dinner table. So please give another round of applause to our panelists. Our second panel today, is named Climate Challenges and Solutions. What are we going to do, and where we'll tackle most of the most pressing environmental challenges facing our state, and explore solutions, particularly through the lens of public policy and community engagement. It is my pleasure to introduce Victoria Leandra, who is an award-winning journalist and national correspondent, recognized as the future of journalism by the Smithsonian National Museum of American History. She is a powerful voice in U.S. media, covering culture, identity, and the issues that matter mostly to our communities. At Courier, we're incredibly lucky to have her talent driving our mission forward. Please join me in welcoming Victoria Leandra to the stage. It's also my pleasure to introduce Carolina Chacon, a highly experienced communicator, strategist, and community organizer with over a decade of work in advocating for clean energy and climate justice. For the past 9 years, Carolina has been a consultant on campaigns focused on land protection and environmental equity, always centering the voices of marginalized communities. Since 2017, she has been instrumental in leading the Clean Buses for Healthy Niños campaign for Chispa, a program of lead conservation voters. Please join me in welcoming Carolina Chacon.
Hola Carolina, how are you?
Hola, buenos días, ¿cómo estás?
Bien, bien. Emocionado de que estés aquí, así que gracias por decir presente.
Sí, muchas gracias por invitarme. Muy feliz de estar aquí con ustedes.
No worries, this will be a conversation in English. We just wanted to throw you off a little bit. Let's jump right in. What are some of the key issues that Latinos are facing here in Nevada as it relates to climate change?
Well, I think we just heard some of these in the previous panel, and an amazing job for the folks that were just on the stage. But extreme heat, certainly. We just had the 101st day of over 100-degree weather, and we're looking at an October that has, again, broken more records than previous years. So we are dealing with heat that is now not only extreme and coming in heat waves, but that is frankly dangerous, unnatural, not safe for communities, for anyone that lives here, not safe for the wildlife, not safe for our plants. If you have a garden, you know what it's been like. So heat, certainly one of the worst impacts that we are feeling now, what feels like 9 months out of the year. We're also still in a drought, which climate change has only made worse. We are dealing with wildfires that contaminate our air. We are dealing with contamination from power plants, from dirty fossil fuels that get imported from out of state that impact our health. Asthma rates have gone up because of this. Hospitalizations, ER visits. So we're dealing with so many different impacts that the community is facing that just feel like they're all stacking one on top of the other. The housing crisis even. And it's making it feel like this is an unlivable environment.
It's interesting that you mentioned the housing crisis, because a lot of times people don't think about climate change and relate it to the housing crisis, right? So I appreciate you for making that connection. And it's not something that we're seeing only here in Nevada, right? We're seeing the effects of hurricanes like Milton and Helene, and for the Puerto Rican community, for example, Maria a few years back, right? When you think about climate change, who do you think about?
Well, I think of, honestly, my parents. But I think of the Latino community. I think of the Black community. I think of the communities that have been forced to live next to highways, that have been forced into neighborhoods that are hotter next to the airport, neighborhoods where you see more pollution come through. I think of communities that in the agricultural sector, for example, folks that are working outdoors picking our food, and they have to live through wildfires, dirty air, extreme heat. I think of the workers here who work outdoors and suffer through that, even the delivery driver that comes to my door. But I think of the people who are least prepared to be able to handle a climate emergency, that can't just put everything in a car and go somewhere else if there's a wildfire or a hurricane coming. I think of the people whose livelihood depends on working outdoors, and how many days can they work outdoors. And so if you have extreme heat and they say, you know what, we can't work at the construction site, or your hours are cut because it is just impossible to be out there, or you're in a housing crisis and so you no longer have as many construction shifts anyhow. I think of those folks that are suffering economically, are suffering in their health, and if we don't bring in solutions to the climate crisis, they're the ones that will be paying. And not just, again, with their pocketbook, with their livelihoods, but with their lives in many cases. Climate change has severe health impacts. I think of the next generation of kids who are wondering what kind of planet will they have 40 years from now. Not even 40 years. I talk to kids who are wondering what's going to happen 10, 20 years from now. What kind of world will I be living in? Should I have a family? What kind of jobs will I have? So I think those are some of the folks that I think about when I think of climate injustice.
Yeah. And it's important to humanize this, because one of the things that we do at El Nevadense is humanize those issues, right? Tell the stories of the local people, the local community, and how everything that we are discussing affects them directly. Because sometimes that's how you kind of get people to pay attention, like, hey, this is what will happen to you. Now, you represent an organization called Chispa, an organization that brings tools to local leaders to become the next generation, or local folks who want to become the next generation of leaders. Why would you say an organization like this exists, and why does it matter?
Well, Chispa was founded almost a decade ago at this point, as part of what had arisen in the League of Conservation Voters, which is one of the big green groups at the national level. At first, they were just trying to do field outreach into the Latino community. But it became clear, and there were many folks who knew this for a long time, and that there was a need, that the Latino community is extremely worried about climate change. They're extremely concerned about air quality, about air pollution, about water quality, about what kind of future are we going to leave for our kids. But no one's talking to them about that. And traditional big green organizations just didn't have the resources, they didn't have the people, to be honest, the leaders, to be able to have those conversations with the Latino community. And so Chispa was founded to ensure that Latinos were talking to Latinos about climate change, about climate justice, about how can we organize our communities and build our own power so that we can hold elected leaders accountable for the priorities that we have as our communities, the things that we want to see, the solutions that we want to see to improve our environment. And unfortunately, it was something that was necessary because the environmental movement has not always been an inclusive space. That is changing. It could change a lot faster. But an organization like Chispa is really necessary so that you have folks in the Latino community talking to their neighbors, talking to their families about how we're being impacted by climate, about the solutions that are on the table, but more than that, so that we are organizing ourselves, our families, our networks, our neighborhoods, to make sure that, again, we're holding those in power accountable to the priorities that we have, and that we are building power within our community so that we are undeniable. In the face of climate change, we must be listened to. We must be at the table making those decisions. We have to be driving what the decisions look like and what those decisions will look like in our communities.
Mm-hmm. And we'll talk about representation a little bit later, but I think it's important that we, and you all know this because you do this on a daily basis, but having those one-on-one conversations with Latinos is extremely important because oftentimes, like you're saying, they haven't heard from anyone. No one has sort of approached them. I've had the opportunity of traveling across the US with Courier Newsroom as a national correspondent this year, interviewing young Latino voters ahead of the upcoming presidential election. And there's a lot of them who feel disengaged with the political system. And it's maybe because no one has talked to them, right? Some of them say, I'm not gonna vote because I'm not educated enough to vote, or I don't know enough about the issues, I don't know enough about the candidates. As it pertains to climate change, how can we bridge that gap?
Well, I think sometimes the community feels like they're not experts and so they don't know enough. But what we try to remind folks of as CHISPA is that every single person is an expert in their own lived experience. And so the things that you've lived through, the things that you're struggling with, those make you an expert in what are some of these solutions that we need. You know what the problems are in your community. You know that you want greener parks, cleaner water, a better education for your kids. And so you don't have to be a policy expert to have a voice in the decisions that are being made. As a matter of fact, we need the community perspective so that we are building solutions that aren't just around a climate goal of 0% by a certain date, but that are based on actually improving people's lives. That's what we need. And so at CHISPA, we try so hard to remind the community that we are all experts in our own right in what we're living through each day, and that experience really, really does matter. Another thing that we do at CHISPA is that we try to train folks to become their own environmental leaders. And so we have promotores trainings, we have trainings on how to do public speaking, how to talk to your community, how to host a house party, so that they're really, again, having some of those tools that they might need to be able to affect change in their own communities, to go speak at a public utilities commission hearing, to go speak at a school board meeting, to meet with an elected leader, to meet with their legislator. And it doesn't take a lot to learn how to do that. And we find that once people get some of those key tools, they are extremely excited to do that, and they're ready to do it.
And if we're talking about how Latinos are directly affected by climate change, I want to use the example of poor air quality. We know that communities of color in general are disproportionately affected because most of the times they live near the highways or they live in industrial areas. So how can we ensure that the benefits of initiatives like Clean Cars Nevada, the benefits of those initiatives go directly to those same folks that are affected?
Well, if we're going to incentivize clean vehicles, then we need to make sure that the community can access them. And for many folks, especially in the Latino community, especially in low-income communities, electric vehicles are simply out of reach. They're not affordable. In some cases, they're not available at the dealership that you're used to go to or in the secondhand market where you're used to, getting a vehicle maybe from a friend or a compadre or something like that. And so we need to improve access to electric vehicles for the communities that already live in the most polluted neighborhoods. And that means a strong secondhand market, a used market of vehicles. We need more incentives to make buying an electric vehicle easier. But more than that, we need education. We need charging infrastructure. We need to make sure that there are charging stations everywhere, that they're accessible, that they're easy to use, that they have multiple languages, that they take multiple forms of payment, that we are having conversations in the community about how to use them. We need to make sure that there are affordable utility rates so that you're drawing, as you're drawing energy from the grid at what you pay for your electricity bills so that they don't shoot up. So there are so many different ways to make electric vehicles more accessible to the community, but we also need to talk about some of the bigger and heavier duty vehicles that are causing so much of the pollution. And the community is impacted not just by the cars that drive nearby, but as we've said before, the 18-wheelers that are going on the freeway. And so we also need to electrify those types of vehicles, the school buses that are in your neighborhoods every single day. Because we know that those are a major source of pollution, and reducing that pollution will have clear benefits for families.
And it's not only about the access to these cars, it's also chargers,
Yes.
right? Because you can have the car, but most of the times they're not necessarily in your neighborhood, so you have to drive a little bit farther, right, to charge this car. So
Yeah, absolutely. You definitely want to see the charging infrastructure everywhere. If you're taking a road trip, you want to be able to know where those electric vehicle chargers are going to be. And again, they need to be very easy to use, multiple languages, multiple forms of payment. But even before you want to buy an electric vehicle, you need to have the confidence that you'll be able to, the way that you know there are gas stations around every corner, that a charger is going to be there and that is going to be reliable for you to use. How long is it going to take for you to use that charger? You need to make sure that you have that infrastructure in place so that folks do feel comfortable even investing in an electric vehicle or even a hybrid, a plug-in hybrid. That can be a bridge for many communities, but we don't have the infrastructure there yet.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Another example, outdoor workers, many of whom are Latino, are impacted by the effects of rising emissions, again, poor air quality and extreme heat. What measures could be taken to protect them?
So many different things. The previous panel talked about it a little bit, and the Nevada Environmental Justice Coalition has really done a lot of great work in this area. The OSHA regulations are really important, and certainly the federal government is looking at some, but I think we need our own here in Nevada so that workers have strong protections, regulations that their employers must follow, so that depending on different temperature levels, we're looking at what kind of breaks they get, how much water is available to them, protective equipment if necessary. And again, like we said, it's not just the workers that are directly outdoors, but you also need that for the workers that might be in warehouses where air conditioning is maybe rare. Or we've all seen stories where the warehouses with robots get more air conditioning, unfortunately, than the workers themselves, because the danger of overheating is just a lot quicker with a machine. So those are some of the things that we can do, certainly, to protect them. We definitely need more green spaces, more shade. Many places in Las Vegas where you have some of the outdoor workers are urban heat islands. And so you have a lot of concrete, you have very little greenery, and you have very little shade. And so even if you're taking a break, you don't really have a good place to go to cool down. And so it's really important that we are looking at how we can increase our tree canopy with desert-adapted plants. How can we make sure that we are that the paints that we use in our buildings, the way that our buildings are actually built, that really impacts the environment that is around you and how much it absorbs heat and keeps you trapped in this heat dome. But I think that the thing that we need to do most immediately is really look at what is causing heat to go up. What is behind the heat waves that we've been talking about? And that is climate change. That is drawing energy, I should say, from fossil fuels. And so we need immediate action to address that. So everything else that we're talking about is essentially adapting to a changing climate, but we need to stop climate change. And in order to do that, we really need to look at how we can transition to clean energy economy, to 100% clean energy as quickly as possible, so that we avoid some of the heat waves that are expected to come 50 years from now.
And I think part of the problem, too, is that sometimes a person from the community, a Latino, may feel ashamed by not knowing, by not being educated enough, and it's hard to sort of even get into the conversation where you don't really know where to start. So how does Chispa sort of do that first outreach, and how will you say it's a good opportunity or way to sort of start the conversation with a Latino who using the language that they can understand, and it's language that is not necessarily the language that the media or organizations or politicians use, but it's colloquial language, right? So how are you doing that?
We do that by hiring people from the community. And so Chispa's organizers are everyday folks that can talk to everyday people, because they're not policy wonks. They're not academics. They're not communications experts. They're just real people. And so if they're at a tabling event, they're able to talk to someone and approach them about values that we share. Hey, are you worried about our air quality? Great, we've got this campaign to transition school buses to electric so that we are removing some of that pollution from kids, the environment where kids are at. Are you worried about high electricity bills? Great. We've got a campaign that focuses on how we can hold utilities accountable, not only for transitioning to clean energy, but also for the rate hikes that are caused by importing methane gas from out of state. We talk about the heat that we're experiencing, the water concerns that so many communities have. So we're really focused on talking about the values that we share, the issues that are impacting people today. And a lot of those values are, you want a better future for your kids? That's what we're working on. You want a healthier environment for your family? Great, come to Chispa. You want to talk about what it means to have a healthy, sustainable environment for generations to come. You want to talk about clean air, clean water, clean energy? Great, that's what we're focused on.
You mentioned water. We all know the situation over at the Colorado River. The water levels are declining. How is this affecting Latinos? Can you give me some examples?
Well, we draw more than 95% of our water from the Colorado River. So, of our drinking water in Southern Nevada. We are hugely reliant upon this river, but we're not the only ones. There are about 40 million people throughout the Southwest that depend on the Colorado River for their daily lives. So anytime that you use, your tap water to take a shower, to fill up a glass of water, to boil some pasta or some rice, you are using water that comes from that river. And so we are using it every single day, which means any sort of impact to the Colorado River, we are certainly going to feel. I do want to credit the Southern Nevada Water Authority has done a lot of work to make sure that our communities aren't going to run out of water anytime soon. That has included billion-dollar infrastructure. It has included billion-dollar campaigns to get people to use less water. But I think we're already feeling the effects. When we talk to folks in the community, we hear a lot about, our community loves going to the lake. We love having a lake day, whether that's renting out a boat or just hanging out by the beach. And seeing that bathtub ring around Lake Mead is really impactful. And people remember that. You drive by, you fly over it, and you see it. You can visually see how much water we've lost. So that's an impact that we feel, that the community feels. They know something is wrong. But if you work outside, you know how much we need water. If you work in landscaping, you know how much we need water. If you are part of this community, you understand just how much water is life. And so we know that the impacts that will come is right now we're feeling, how much water do we have left? When we build new construction, will we have water to service those new homes? Will that affect construction jobs that many folks in our community have? We want to be able to just always, use our tap water, turn our tap, and know that water will be there. And so I think the fear is, what happens if we don't have that? And that is something that our community is living with every single day. We also know that the Latino community disproportionately works in agriculture. So while we don't have a ton of agriculture here in Nevada per se, or at least in Southern Nevada, we know that there are many folks who come from California, who have lived in California, who have worked in the agricultural industry. And they're very concerned about what the drought means for them, what climate change means for them. And our community, I think water conservation is very ingrained in the culture. So we're doing what we can to conserve that water, but certainly it's a question of what else? What else can we do?
And I love that you mentioned simple things like boiling water to make rice, because I don't know about you, but my mom makes rice every single day growing up. So if you tell her that, she will understand the situation. As everyday consumers, what can we do? Because oftentimes I think it's the simple things, right? So what are you over at Chispa sort of telling the community that they can change? What are the small changes that would impact greatly?
Yeah. Well, certainly recycling. Obviously, we talk about recycling. We talk about being smart with your water use, with your electricity use. But To be honest, I think that the most important thing that we can do is become an advocate for our communities. Because again, our families are already turning off the light every time we leave the room. We're already mindful of how much water we use, how long that shower is. So we're doing what we can to conserve. It's very ingrained in our culture to conserve, to preserve, to protect, to reuse, to reduce, to recycle. But it's not part of the wider culture. And I think at this point, it's really upon us to become advocates for our communities, for our neighborhoods, to make sure that we have a livable future, to make sure we have a healthy and sustainable planet. I know that a lot of the younger folks that Chispa talks to are also very interested in secondhand clothes. Use less, buy less, how can we thrift more? We've hosted workshops. We've got folks who have hosted workshops to help introduce people to the idea of thrifting or how to craft a closet out of thrifting. So again, the community is very interested in that. But even if we recycled every single piece of plastic that we used, even if we planted 1,000 trees, even if we, turned the lights off as much as humanly possible, it doesn't change. That will not solve the climate crisis. It will not make our problems go away. And so we really need to become advocates in our communities for the kind of future we want to see. You don't have to be a policy expert. You don't have to know all the facts, know all the science. You just have to know what kind of future you want for your kids. And that's what we try to do at Chispa, is take people who really care about that, turn them into leaders, so that we all have a better future.
Thrifting or vintage, because some folks have rebranded the whole initiative. Nevada has committed to 100% clean energy by 2050. What does this mean to everyday Nevadans?
Well, every time you turn on a light switch, that electricity is coming from somewhere. And unfortunately in Nevada, about 60% of our energy use, and that does include the gas that we use for heating and cooking, comes from fossil fuels, predominantly gas. Now, many of you already know Nevada doesn't produce a lot of gas. We are a very sunny state, but unfortunately we are relying from gas that we export from out of state. And so transitioning to 100% clean electricity would really mean that we are drawing upon our homegrown resources, like the sun that we unfortunately have to live through every single day, and using those to power our homes, to power our buildings. It would mean cleaner air. It would mean reduced climate pollution. It would mean better health for everyone, but especially the communities that live closest to power plants, closest to highways. It would really mean a much healthier environment, much healthier lives for all of us. But 2050 is too far away. We need to get there so much faster. We need that energy to transition to 100% clean energy now. And what a lot of our community is interested, what we hear all of the time from members is, look, I want my energy to come from clean energy, but I have no control over the electricity company that I buy power from, right? We have NV Energy, and they're a monopoly utility. And unfortunately, that means that folks don't have a choice. So they have to go with NV Energy, and NV Energy, again, doesn't rely on 100% clean energy, and they don't have a lot of programs to help you access clean energy. So we get a lot of community members that say, what can I do to make sure that the electricity I'm using actually comes from cleaner sources? The community has been very, very interested in community solar. How can we have solar panels if we're not renters or if we can't afford rooftop solar? How can we still have access to solar energy? How can we make sure that we are putting solar panels on top of every parking lot, on top of every school, everywhere? So having clean electricity would mean a lot to the community. It's something that they want to see even sooner because they want that future right now. There are federal programs, like was mentioned earlier, like the Solar for All Fund. Nevada has received $156 million, which is huge. Per capita, our state received the most amount of funding in the nation, which is a big deal for Nevada. Doesn't happen always. that program will actually help statewide at least 20,000 households get access to cleaner energy. So that's a really great place to start. But what is even better about that program, the thing that our community, I think, is most thrilled when we tell them, is that that program is guaranteed for the households that it helps to help them save at least 20% on their household bill every single month, which is huge. We hear so many stories of community members that are really struggling to pay their bills. We just took about over 50 members to the Public Utilities Commission, where they shared to the commissioners what it's been like with some of the really high rates that we've experienced here in Nevada. And we had stories of folks that are struggling to put food on the table, that are putting off dentist visits, that are telling their kids, I'm sorry, we can't buy new clothes for the school year because we have to keep the lights on. There are people who are making really difficult decisions to keep the lights on, and a lot of that has to do with where we get our power from. And again, if we're getting it from out of state and we're paying billions of dollars on dirty fossil fuels that are very volatile in pricing, dependent on international markets, we are unfortunately going to have unpredictable bills for a long time to come, which is why the community is excited by the prospect of clean energy, but also why they're very excited about the idea of solar for all. Someone that participates in that program, again, could see that 20% reduction in their electricity bills, and that's huge. That is a huge, huge help for so many community members that are really struggling to get by right now because our electricity rates have just shot up.
Yeah. Talking about funding, Chispa secured $5 billion nationwide for electric school buses. Tell me a little bit more. Yes, round of applause. Snaps. Why is this important?
For so many reasons, but the primary reason is that it means kids will have healthier lives. So right now, there are about almost 500,000 school buses throughout the country. Over 90% of those are diesel. Diesel school buses are incredibly, incredibly polluting. Multiple studies have shown that they can be 5 to 12 times as polluting as a kid that's just riding on a regular car to school. So by putting our children in these diesel buses, we are really putting their health at risk. So since about 2017, and there are people in this room who've led this campaign since about that time, Chispa has led a campaign to try to convince school districts to switch over from diesel to electric school buses. We have advocated to governors that they should use funding from the Volkswagen settlement and use that to invest in electric school buses. We've had some mixed results with that. But since 2017, Chispa has been agitating, organizing, hosting rallies and press conferences, doing deliveries of petitions, and really driving forth this message. Do you know that your kid is riding in a diesel school bus that can cause asthma, that can worsen a lot of respiratory illnesses, that can lead to even cancer? There's studies that also show that diesel pollution has caused kids to miss more days of school because they're dealing with asthma attacks, because they're having trouble concentrating. Studies that have shown that diesel even impacts or worse pollution. On the days with the worst pollution, kids do worse on their math and English tests. So it's been proven, scientifically proven many times over, that diesel isn't good for kids. Kids whose lungs and brains are still developing are really, really vulnerable to this pollution. And so Chispa has led that work to make sure that we are transitioning to a clean ride for kids so that we improve not just our air quality and the working environment for drivers, but the air that kids are breathing as they ride in that bus, as they get on that bus, as they are leaving that bus. And we've been successful. We are very grateful that through all of this community organizing and all of this work, we were able to work to introduce legislation in Congress in 2019 that then helped inform what became the bipartisan infrastructure law and created this $5 billion program at EPA. We are thrilled that Clark County School District, which is our local school district, the 5th largest in the country, they've applied for that EPA funding and they've received it. So they've received about nearly $10 million for electric school buses. That should be arriving next year. In Northern Nevada, the Nevada Clean Energy Fund also applied for another 25 electric school buses and received nearly $8 million, and they're working through a grant right now that will put electric school buses throughout Washoe and many, many other rural counties. And so overall, thanks to the Clean School Bus Program at EPA, which was part of the bipartisan infrastructure law, Nevada is going to have at least 50 electric school buses in the years to come, and that means cleaner air for our kids, and that's just invaluable.
Yes, I get goosebumps even thinking about it. Obviously, we have a presidential election coming up, and we know what each candidate represents and what they don't represent. What do you think Trump presidency would mean or could mean for local folks here in Nevada, specifically as it ties to climate change, of course?
Well, I want to highlight that CHISPA is a nonpartisan organization, so we don't endorse candidates, have not endorsed a candidate. But what we have heard from community members is that they want someone that is going to take climate action. They want someone that cares about the same things that they care about, which is clean air for their kids, clean water to drink, and a healthy future for their families. And we did not see that during the former Trump administration. We saw environmental regulations rolled back. We saw the power of agencies like the EPA weakened. We saw a lack of focus completely on climate justice. And so what would a future Trump presidency hold? If we look at the past, if we see what the first Trump administration did, then I think we have a pretty clear view of what would happen. We already know that Donald Trump, as a candidate in this election year, has promised to claw back any funding, any federal funding that hasn't been spent, and use it for other purposes. We know that his campaign has talked about removing the tax credits that would allow people to get money back for buying an electric vehicle or putting solar panels on the roof or making other energy efficiency upgrades to their home. And they actually want to give those tax credits or those tax breaks to fossil fuels, to propane or diesel vehicles or gasoline-powered cars. And that not only means money that our communities wanted and are receiving and are benefiting from, but it also means dirtier air. It means worse climate impacts. It means more hurricanes, more floods. It means worse wildfires. It means dirtier air. It means more days where kids can't play outside. It means more days where it's too hot to be outside. So that's what's at stake. And the community, I think, really understands that when it comes to the environment, they need a president who is willing to take action, who is willing to prioritize their health.
There's a portion of the Latino electorate that supports Donald Trump. What will your message be to someone who cares about climate change and is concerned, but is choosing to vote for him despite his stance?
And I want to say again, CHISPA is nonpartisan and talks to anyone regardless of their party affiliation. And in fact, we don't ask about party affiliation ever. But I think for us, the message is always based on what are your priorities? What is it that matters to you and your family? And let's talk about what that means. So we are not convincing anyone to vote any which way. We are not convincing anyone to support a particular candidate. We're letting people do the work for themselves to compare records, but we are talking about the wins that we have seen, for example, like the bipartisan infrastructure law that passed under President Biden. We are talking about facts like Vice President Harris was actually the first person to sponsor in Congress any electric school bus legislation. So we do highlight the wins that we have seen and what's at stake, but to be honest, we know that people are smart enough to compare the records and make the decision that they want to make for their families and for themselves. But it is important that people have that level of understanding, right? Of what is it that this president has done for me? Well, we can share some of that because we've actually seen some wins under this presidency that we want to celebrate.
There's so many amazing local organizations here tonight. So first, I want to thank you again for all the work that you do. But it's important to ask, where do you need support or extra support to take this conversation out into the community?
Well, I think one of the things that we need is for decision makers to really understand that the Latino community, that Latina families in Nevada really care about the environment, and they really care about the impacts that they're feeling every single day. And we need our government agencies to be more accessible. We need language inclusive materials and education. We need government meetings to not be in the middle of the workday or halfway across town where you can't get there very easily, or especially not during rush hour. We need it to be easy for people to participate in their government, in their Public Utilities Commission meetings, in their legislative hearings, and so often those places are not inclusive, they are not welcoming to our community members, and they feel like it's very hard to make themselves heard. They have opinions, they have thoughts just like anyone else, but it's very difficult for them to make themselves heard because the systems aren't put in place. We have many government agencies that are meant to serve the public interest, and yet they have no one that can speak Spanish, that can come to an event. We just held a resource fair last night, and we were glad to have so many different partners that actually did have folks that could come and speak to the community in Spanish, but so many of our agencies don't. They don't have culturally competent materials. They don't have linguistically competent materials that would help the community be more engaged in their government. Also understand the plans that government has for them, whether that's a climate plan or a transportation plan or a plan for transit buses. The community needs that education and needs that information, but they also need to hear from people that can speak their language, that can talk to them in a way that is approachable, and we very, very often lack that in the places where decisions are being made. And so we still show up, we still go there. CHISPA provides interpretation. I can't name just how much we've had to provide our own interpretation services for community members to make themselves heard so that they have an avenue to speak. We help translate letters, we have an interpreter for public hearings, but it's not enough. And so that's one of the big things that we need. And the other is that we need our decision makers to take climate change very, very seriously because we're already feeling the impacts. And so we need them to be talking to the community about what are the problems that they see in their day-to-day lives and what are some of the solutions that they want to see. We need a climate office in Nevada. We don't have one. We used to, but we don't anymore under this current governor. And so we need those agencies to also be talking to the community because they are in charge. They are using our tax dollars to pass policies and execute policies, and so they need to be talking to our communities. It's very tough for us to constantly be going to them. They need to create the spaces to welcome us.
I hear some snaps in the audience. I love it. You mentioned representation earlier and also the importance of being represented in the spaces where decision-making or environmental decision-making is happening. What steps could we take to increase that Latino representation specifically in those spaces?
Well, like I mentioned, some of the inclusivity that is so sorely missing from so many of our government spaces. But I think making the room for just more community engagement overall is really, really critical. Decisions are made so often, like we've talked about in Congress or in Carson City, in places that aren't accessible to the community. And so they feel very far away. And so that is something that I think our elected leaders could be looking at. How can we make sure that folks are more represented? CHISPA is also always welcoming folks. We have a monthly community meeting where we always invite folks to come and present and come talk to the community, let them know what you're working on, what your priorities are, but also hear from them, listen to them, really listen to what the community wants, and that will help you be very, very successful. We also need more support so that we can train folks to be part of boards and commissions where those decisions are being made. We need more support to ensure that the community, again, feels welcomed into these spaces that are simply just not designed for us. We need more support to help families that that are looking for how they can make a difference in their kids' lives, in their kids' education, but are really lacking that. So there's so many different ways that decision makers can be more supportive. But the first thing is come talk to the community, and you'll hear the solutions that they have to offer.
Thank you. Gracias, Carolina, for being here. We appreciate it. Thank you.
nada.
Wow, that was an amazing conversation. Thank you, Victoria. Thank you, Carolina. I have, unfortunately, some bad news. We were going to have Attorney General Aaron Ford. Unfortunately, he was not able to make it. But on the positive side, we have light food and beverages. I hope that makes it up. Yeah. Thank you so much for participating in these conversations. Thank you for being here. Thank you to all of our partners for contributing, making this amazing event happen, and fostering these great conversations that are very needed to hear. People at home needs to know what's going on, why this is being affected in the Latinx community. Why are we having so many issues, and what has been done? The amazing organizations that stepped here and talk about the amazing work that they're doing. It's something that we all can collaborate, and it's very, very amusing to me to have such an amazing crowd here and an amazing crowd watching from home, getting engaged in something very important, which is making a positive change in this climate change that we're having and experiencing. Thank you, everyone. With this, I will close the event. Please feel free to stay. We have, like I said, beverages and some light catering. And you can engage with discussions with our panelists, myself, and the team members. Thank you so much.